think for a moment about the peace of mind we have, knowing that the medicines we take, the devices doctors use, even the food we buy, are held to certain standards. How is that confidence actually built? What's the system, that makes sure these products are safe and effective before they ever get to us?
That assurance, which we often take for granted, really comes down to a critical process: regulatory filings.
Regulatory filings. Okay.
Now, I know that might not sound like the most thrilling topic.
Oh, maybe not up front.
Right. But these submissions are truly the foundation of public health. Across pharmaceuticals, medical devices, the food sector, it's key.
Okay, so regulatory filings. When a company submits one, what does that actually mean for you and me, the consumers? What are they trying to do?
Well, basically, these filings are formal, really in-depth documents. Companies developing these products have to provide them to government regulatory agencies.
Like the FDA here in the US?
Exactly, like the FDA. And it's not just filling out forms. They're presenting a comprehensive case backed by solid scientific evidence that their product is safe, it works, and it's high quality.
So they're proving it.
They're proving it. It's their way of saying, look, here's all the proof our product does what we claim, and it won't cause harm.
Okay, so it's about accountability then. Showing their work, backing up promises with actual data.
Precisely.
Our goal today then is to really unpack these regulatory filings to see why they're so critical for, well, keeping us safe, but also maybe for driving innovation too.
Absolutely. That's a key part of it.
We'll be looking at different kinds of filings across these industries: pharmaceuticals, devices, food, trying to give a full picture of how this system works.
Sounds good. And let's maybe start with pharmaceuticals. Because in this sector, regulatory compliance isn't just important, it's absolutely fundamental.
The bedrock, you could say.
It really is. It's the bedrock of patient safety, product quality, legal standing, and honestly, just the ability to even bring a drug to market at all.
And that very first step for any new drug hoping to eventually help patients. That's the Investigational New Drug application, the IND, right?
That's it, the IND. It's a really significant moment.
What is involved?
Well, before any company can begin testing a new drug, or it's called a biologic.
Like vaccines or some cancer therapies?
Exactly, things derived from living organisms. Before they test those on humans, they must submit an IND to the FDA. Think of it like asking for permission.
Permission to start human trials.
Permission to responsibly introduce something potentially powerful into human trials. It's all about ensuring the safety of those first participants and, just as importantly, the scientific integrity of the whole research process.
So it's a safety net for us,
Yeah.
making sure they've done their homework before testing on people.
That's a great way to put it. It's a crucial safety net, ensuring no experimental drug enters human testing without a thorough initial safety check, protecting people from unforeseen risks.
Okay, so the IND is the gatekeeper for clinical trials. I think there are different categories of INDs. How do those work?
Yes, there are a few categories. First, you have the investigator IND.
Investigator. So, led by a doctor.
Often, yeah. It's usually initiated by a physician who might have an idea for using an already approved drug in a new way, maybe for a different condition or patient group, and they want to explore that under their direct supervision.
Interesting. Okay, what else?
Then there's the emergency use IND.
Sounds urgent.
It is.
Huh.
As the name suggests, this pathway is for urgent situations, when there just isn't time for the standard IND process.
Like in a public health emergency.
Could be. Or for an individual patient facing an immediate life-threatening condition who doesn't fit the criteria for any ongoing clinical trials. It allows access to an investigational drug in those critical moments.
So there's some built-in flexibility for emergencies. That makes sense.
It does. The system needs that flexibility.
And the third category is the treatment IND.
Exactly. A treatment IND is for experimental drugs that have shown some promising early signs, real potential benefit in treating serious or life-threatening illnesses.
So even before full approval.
Yes, that's the interesting part. Companies can submit this type of application while the drug is still under FDA review, maybe in later stage trials. It can potentially provide earlier access to these therapies for very sick patients in open clinics.
Okay, those are the different situations. But then there are also different types of INDs themselves, like commercial versus research.
Correct. Good distinction. A commercial IND is typically filed by a pharmaceutical company. They have a clear plan, to eventually market the drug if it passes all the tests and gets approved.
Makes sense. Standard path.
Right. Then you have the research IND, sometimes called non-commercial. This is usually submitted by private researchers, maybe at universities or academic institutions.
Their goal isn't necessarily selling it.
Not primarily, no. Their aim is more about conducting scientific research, maybe understanding a disease better, or exploring a mechanism, expanding knowledge rather than direct commercialization.
Got it. That clarifies the motivations. Now, regardless of the category or type, what are the absolute must-haves in any IND filing? What does the FDA need to see?
Right, the core components. There are 3 fundamental areas. First, animal pharmacology and toxicology studies.
So the preclinical stuff, lab and animal tests.
Exactly. All the data from that preclinical research. This helps the FDA make that initial call. Is it reasonably safe to even start testing this in humans? This part also includes any previous human experience, maybe from trials done elsewhere.
Okay. Safety data first. What's second?
Second is manufacturing information.
How the drug is actually made.
Yes, details on its composition, who's making it, how stable the drug is, and crucially, all the quality control measures. They need to show they can make it consistently, batch after batch.
Quality control seems vital. You need the same drug every time.
Absolutely essential. And the third key component.
What's number 3?
That's the clinical protocols and investigator information.
The plan for the human trials.
The complete plan, especially for those first phase 1 trials, which focus heavily on safety in a small group. It has to clearly show how they'll minimize risks to participants.
And who's running the trial?
Yes, information on the qualifications of the clinical investigators, often physicians, and very importantly, strong guarantees about informed consent.
Meaning people understand what they're signing up for.
Fully understand. Plus, proof the study will be reviewed by an institutional review board, an IRB.
The ethics committee.
Right, the ethics committee, protecting participant rights. And finally, an assurance they'll follow all the IND rules.
Wow, that's a really comprehensive package, all focused on safety and good science right from the start.
It has to be.
And then the FDA reviews all this. What happens then? How long does it take?
Once the FDA gets the IND, they have a 30-day window to review it. Their main job here is to see if the proposed research puts participants at unreasonable risk.
Just 30 days. Seems quick for all that info.
It's an intensive 30 days. They thoroughly examine everything for safety red flags. If, within those 30 days, the FDA doesn't issue what's called a clinical hold.
Let's stop sign, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. A pause on the trials. If there's no hold, then the researchers get the green light to proceed with their planned clinical studies.
So that 30-day review is another vital checkpoint, another layer of protection.
Exactly. An initial safety evaluation before anyone receives the experimental drug.
Okay, so let's fast forward. Let's say a drug successfully makes it through all the clinical trial phases, phase 1, 2, 3, showing it's safe enough and actually works. What's the next big regulatory step? That's the new drug application, the NDA, isn't it?
That's the one, the NDA. This is really the culmination of years, sometimes decades of research, testing, refinement.
All that work bundled up.
Everything. All the clinical evidence, plus all the details on how the drug will be manufactured consistently on a larger scale. It's a massive submission.
What's the core argument they're making with an NDA?
They're essentially saying, okay, here's our drug. Here is all the data proving it's safe and effective for this specific condition. And here's exactly how we're going to make it reliably.
So what are the key pieces of information the FDA digs into when they get an NDA? More detailed than the IND, I assume.
Oh, much more detail. Tons of data. First, you have the preclinical and clinical information. This is the huge data set from all the human trials, phase 1, 2, and 3, plus all the supporting lab work. It has to definitively show safety and efficacy for the intended use.
Prove it works and the benefits outweigh risks.
That's the core assessment. Second, like the IND, is the manufacturing information. But now it's even more detailed. Ingredients, the full manufacturing process, rigorous quality control measures for large-scale production, ensuring standards and purity for the market.
Consistency again.
Always. And I imagine the labeling, how the drug info is presented, that's also a huge part of the NDA.
Oh, absolutely critical. The labeling section includes samples of the proposed packaging, inserts, everything.
What kind of info?
All the crucial stuff healthcare professionals and patients need. How to use it, dosages, potential side effects, warnings, who shouldn't take it, drug interactions. Everything.
Clear instructions are key for safe use. Absolutely vital. Clear, accurate labeling ensures the drug is used safely and effectively.
So the FDA gets this mountain of data in the NDA. What are their main goals during this really intensive review? What are they checking?
Their primary objectives are kind of threefold. First, obviously, safety and efficacy assessment. They pore over the data. Do the benefits truly outweigh the risks for the intended patient population?
Fundamental question.
The fundamental question. Second, labeling evaluation. Is the proposed label clear? Does it unambiguously communicate all the essential instructions and warnings for appropriate use?
No room for confusion.
None. And third, manufacturing compliance. They conduct rigorous checks. Can this company consistently make this drug according to the strict standards needed for purity and quality? They often inspect the manufacturing facilities too.
Wow. Okay, so the NDA really is the final gate before a new drug can actually reach patients. It signals a massive commitment to safety, efficacy, and quality.
Precisely. It's the last major regulatory step before market entry.
Okay, fascinating. Now let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about the medical device industry. The path there looks a bit different, I understand. For many devices, it starts with something called a 510(k) submission.
That's right, the 510(k). It's often seen as a more, let's say, efficient route for many types of medical devices to get market clearance.
More efficient how? What's the core idea?
The central concept is substantial equivalence.
Substantial equivalence. Okay, what does that mean in practice?
It basically means showing that a new medical device is just as safe and just as effective as a device that's already legally out there on the market. That existing device is called the predicate device.
So you compare it to something already approved.
Exactly. If a manufacturer can demonstrate their new device has similar technology, the same intended use, and crucially that any differences don't raise new safety or effectiveness questions compared to that predicate.
Then they can use this 510(k) pathway.
Often, yes. Instead of needing the much more intensive premarket approval or PMA process, which is saved for the higher risk devices.
So this is mainly for lower or moderate risk devices. Things like what?
Things like powered wheelchairs, some diagnostic tests, maybe certain types of catheters. Stuff where the risk isn't minimal, but it's not life-sustaining either. It allows for quicker innovation in those areas.
Okay, so it's about showing it's similar to something already proven. What does a company actually need to do in a 510(k) submission?
Well, several key things. First, as we said, identification of a predicate device. They have to pick that legally marketed device that serves as the benchmark.
Find their comparison point.
Right. Second, and this is the real heart of the 510(k), is the demonstration of substantial equivalence itself.
How do they demonstrate that?
Through strong evidence, comparing the device's design, its performance testing results, its function, showing that any differences between the new one and the predicate don't create new safety or effectiveness worries. Sometimes this involves bench testing, maybe animal testing, but not always full human clinical trials.
Okay. And I heard the submission process itself is meant to be less burdensome than, say, a PMA.
Yes, that's the design. The 510(k) pathway generally requires less documentation compared to a PMA. Clinical trials often aren't needed unless there are, pretty significant changes to the device that really warrant extra data.
Makes sense.
And this more streamlined process leads to a relatively quick average clearance time, maybe around 5 months historically.
5 months versus potentially years for a new drug?
It can be much faster, yeah. And a high percentage, something like 85% of 510(k)s are typically found to be substantially equivalent. So it allows for quicker market access.
And that's obviously good for industry growth, getting innovations out there faster.
It definitely contributes, allowing companies to launch new products without, hopefully, compromising those core safety and performance standards for lower risk devices.
But for the devices that do carry higher risk, that streamlined approach isn't enough, right? That's where Premarket Approval PMA comes in. You mentioned pacemakers earlier.
Exactly. For those high-risk devices, Class 3 devices, technically, things that support or sustain human life or where a failure could have really severe health consequences, pacemakers, implantable defibrillators, heart valves.
Stuff you really need to be sure about.
Absolutely. For those, the FDA mandates the much more rigorous PMA process, and unlike the 510(k) focusing on is it similar, the PMA is all about maximizing safety and efficacy through a really deep, thorough evaluation of the device itself.
So what does the FDA need to see in a PMA submission? What are they looking for?
It generally boils down to 2 main components: comprehensive scientific evidence and really robust quality controls.
Okay, let's break that down. Comprehensive scientific evidence.
This means extensive, reliable data, clinical and scientific data that convincingly shows the device is safe and effective for its specific intended use.
So this does usually involve human trials.
Oh yes, definitely. It includes preclinical studies, that's the lab and animal testing, checking performance, biocompatibility, how it interacts with the body. But crucially, It requires clinical trials, structured testing in humans under controlled conditions.
To prove it works in people.
To verify safety, performance in different situations, and the overall clinical benefit for patients. And supporting all that is statistical analysis, in-depth number crunching to show the results are reliable and meaningful.
Incredibly thorough on the data side. What about the robust quality controls part?
This focuses on making sure the device can be manufactured consistently to a very high standard every single time.
Because consistency is critical for a life-saving device.
Absolutely. So this includes detailed manufacturing process documentation, clear, precise explanations of how it's made, the quality checks at every step, validation studies proving the process works reliably.
Okay.
It also requires robust risk management plans, identifying potential risks, how they'll manage them, contingency plans if things go wrong. And finally, manufacturers need post-market surveillance plans.
Meaning keeping an eye on it even after it's approved.
Exactly. A plan for how they'll continue to monitor the device's performance and safety out in the real world once doctors and patients are using it, ensuring ongoing compliance.
Wow. It sounds like the FDA really leaves no stone unturned with the PMA. I can definitely see why that review process would take a lot longer than a 510K.
Oh, absolutely. The PMA review is inherently time-intensive. For one, the FDA typically has up to 180 days just for the main review, where their expert teams scrutinize everything.
6 months just for the review.
At least. And second, it often involves an iterative feedback process. The FDA might have dozens, even hundreds of questions. They might need more data, clarifications, leading to back and forth between the company and the agency. It ensures a truly comprehensive evaluation before they make a decision.
Understandable for such high-stakes devices. Okay, we've hit pharmaceuticals and medical devices. Let's switch to the food industry now. The approach there seems different again, especially with this idea of generally recognized as safe GRA. What's that about?
Right, GRAS. In the food world, this is a pretty unique regulatory concept for food ingredients and additives.
Generally recognized as safe.
Essentially, it's a determination made initially by the food company or the ingredient supplier that a particular substance is safe for its intended use in food.
Wait, the company makes the determination, not the FDA directly.
Initially, yes. But it has to be based on a strong foundation of scientific data and, critically, the judgment of qualified experts.
Okay.
The GRAS process helps build consumer confidence, but it can also streamline getting food products to market. It potentially avoids the need for the more extensive pre-market approval process that most actual food additives have to go through.
So it's a different pathway for ingredients generally seen as safe.
Kind of, but that flexibility comes with a big responsibility for the companies to get the science right.
So how does that work? If a company makes its own safety call, what ensures they're doing it right? What are the key features?
Good question. There are several distinguishing features. First is scientific validation. The company must compile a comprehensive body of scientific evidence.
What kind of evidence?
Everything relevant. Peer-reviewed studies, toxicology test results, historical use data showing it's been consumed safely for a long time perhaps. Importantly, they need to consider all the data, positive and negative studies too. It needs to be a robust scientific case for safety.
Okay. Solid science is step one. What else?
Second is expert consensus. This is crucial. The safety determination isn't just based on the data alone. It relies on the consensus view of qualified experts, toxicologists, nutritionists, food scientists.
Independent expert.
Ideally, yes, experts who review the data and agree, based on their professional judgment, that the substance is safe under the specific conditions it'll be used in food. That expert agreement is fundamental.
Okay, so science plus expert agreement. What about transparency? How does the FDA keep tabs on this?
That's the third piece, transparency and data reporting. Now, technically, notifying the FDA of a GRA's conclusion is voluntary.
Voluntary.
It is, which is sometimes debated. However, transparency is strongly encouraged. Companies are urged to submit their GRAS determination, along with all the supporting science and their reasoning, to the FDA.
So the FDA can review it.
Exactly. It allows the agency to look it over, ask questions, and even object if they disagree with the company's safety assessment. This voluntary notification system, while not mandatory, is vital for public trust and lets the FDA oversee the food supply.
So GRAS offers more flexibility than, say, a drug approval.
Yeah.
But the company carries the weight of proving safety and being transparent about it.
Precisely. It's a more flexible route for many common ingredients compared to the mandatory pre-market approval for food additives. But yes, the onus is squarely on the companies to ensure their safety conclusions are scientifically sound and communicated effectively.
Okay, so looking across all three areas, pharma, devices, food, these regulatory submissions, they might look different, IND, NDA, 510K, PMA, GRS, but they all share that core goal, right? Making sure the products we use are safe and they work.
Exactly right. They aren't just bureaucratic hurdles. They are essential tools for upholding product quality, safety, and efficacy. These filings force companies to back up their claims with solid scientific data, clinical trials if needed, and strong quality controls.
And the benefits ripple outwards, don't they? Protects public health first and foremost.
Absolutely.
But it also seems to foster a kind of fair competition, maybe even innovation, by setting clear standards.
It does. By setting those benchmarks, it creates a level playing field and pushes companies to meet high standards. Whether it's the IND starting that careful trial process, the NDA bringing a needed drug to market, the 510K and PMA ensuring device safety, or GRAS confirming ingredient safety. Each filing plays a vital role.
Maintaining standards, building trust.
Maintaining standards, building consumer trust. By engaging with these processes seriously, industries don't just manage risks, they build a framework for continuous improvement and ultimately long-term success.
You know, thinking about the sheer layers of scientific scrutiny and expert review behind every pill, every medical device, every food item, it really gives you a new perspective, doesn't it?
It really does.
What new appreciation do you, listening now, have for these regulatory systems working behind the scenes every day to protect us? Maybe next time you look at a product label or a safety info, you'll see it with a deeper understanding of the intense journey it took to get there.
A journey involving a lot of checks and balances.
Perhaps it even makes you curious to learn more, maybe about specific regulatory pathways or some of the landmark cases that actually shape the standards we depend on today. Something to think.
Thank you, viewers, for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with your colleagues. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel by clicking that subscribe button below so you never miss out on valuable insights. I'm Brian Edmonds, signing off. See you in the next one.